Okay, good evening again, everyone, and welcome to the session tonight. I have done kind of like an audio check, and I believe that everyone can hear me. If the opposite is the case, please do let me know if you're not able to hear me. Okay. All right. My name again is Tolu Yesufu. I'm a certified Safe Scrum Master, a certified product owner, and a business analyst. And I've been working within the industry for a couple of years now. And tonight we will be looking at Agile, the roles of team members within an Agile team, within a Scrum team, the roles of a Scrum Master, the business analyst, the developers, and the product owners. So these are the things that we will be running through tonight. What is this topic about? So I've put together here a high-level bullet point on what this topic is about tonight. So we'll be looking at the three main roles in Agile, some of the roles within an Agile team, the responsibilities of each of these roles, artifacts, and then we will take questions. And like I said, this is just a high level. Going into the next slide, you would see that I've broken that high level bullet point down into lower level sort of. So we will be identifying the different roles. We would look at the Scrum Master, the responsibilities of a Scrum Master, Scrum artifacts, the Scrum Master as a facilitator, the Scrum Master as a servant leader, what a Scrum Master is not. We will look at the product owner's role, the responsibilities of the product owner, the business analyst, the responsibilities of the business analyst, and again, we will look at the product owner versus the business analyst, because the roles of the product owner and the business analyst it's sort of interwoven in a way. And when we get to that slide, you would understand what I mean by that. We will look at the developers within the team and the responsibilities of the developers. Okay, so the three main roles in Agile, anywhere you check this, you would always find the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the developers. Now, what I usually do is when I take sessions like this, I always talk about the theoretical part and the practical side of things as well. So you will find that these are the three main roles in Agile. But when you get to work in a team, you would find that there are more roles again within the team. Most of these roles will still fall under developers, under the roles of developers. But again, you would be asking yourself the questions now that, where is the business analyst in here? So the business analyst is not defined as a member of the Agile team, but they are a crucial part of that team. And you will get to understand that when we get to that slide for the business analyst. Now, some of the other roles that you will find within an Agile project, you will find the role of the data analyst, the data engineer, data architect, system engineer, user research, UX design, solution architect. There are loads of different roles that you would see being mentioned as developers within an Agile team. So look at these roles as developers. They still fall under the role of a developer. So don't see your developer as just your QA and the developer that is developing the front end side of things or the back end side of things. There are loads of other roles out there, but they still fall under that umbrella, developers. Now, who is a Scrum Master? Now, the role that usually gets most attention within the team is the role of a Scrum Master. I know that you've had a session where you've been taken through waterfall and Agile methodology. Now, within the waterfall environment, you would usually have a project manager who manages the team, manages the project. In Agile, what you have is your Scrum Master. Now, your Scrum Master is not a project manager. Instead, rather, the Scrum Master is a combination of an Agile administrator, a coach, a trainer. So what they do is they manage the Scrum process. They manage the Agile process. They make sure that best practice is in place when it comes to Agile and Scrum. They support the team. They don't manage the team. They manage the process itself. Now, as a Scrum Master, one of the things that you want to make sure that you do is you want to make sure that you have a team that is self-organizing. Now, what do I mean by self-organizing? So what this means is that a team that can manage themselves without regular supervision, a team that can work collaboratively together to complete the work, or at least to reach a defined outcome with little or no direct supervision at all from anybody. So that is one of your aims as a Scrum Master. So you need to learn how to practice restraint as a Scrum Master. You don't want to jump in and start managing things. You don't want to turn yourself into a project manager because that is not what you are. So you want to practice restraint, because the moment you start managing your team, the moment you put yourself in that role of a boss, of a project manager, what you're actually doing is you're actually taking your team away from being self-organized. So as a Scrum Master, your role is primarily to make sure that you coach your team, to make sure that your team follows the right process, the best practice when it comes to Agile and when it comes to Scrum itself. And we'll get to more of that, the responsibilities of a Scrum Master. Now, you may have heard when people say, oh, the Scrum Master is a servant leader. Yes, the Scrum Master is a servant leader, and that's what Scrum Guide did say initially. But in November 2020, the Scrum Guide got updated, and they changed it from servant leader to true leaders. And the reason for this was because there was a lot of misconception about servant leaders. Now, when you talk about a servant leader, a Scrum Master has a servant leader. I usually would describe Scrum Masters as servant leaders as leaders that lead from behind. Now, when you talk about being a leader, you see a leader as someone who is at the forefront, someone who puts themselves at the forefront, someone who is leading a team from the front. But as a Scrum Master, being a servant leader, I would usually say, see yourself as Scrum Masters, as servant leaders leading from behind. So you want to be like a support system from your team. They are at the forefront, but you want to lead them from behind. You want to make sure that as a leader from behind, you are supporting them to make sure that they achieve success within the development of whatever it is they're developing, the product they're developing. You want to support their goals. You want to enable growth and promote success. Now, that's what a Scrum Master is as a servant leader. But there were a couple of misconceptions where Scrum Masters were saying, when you say they're servant leaders, people just take the servant side of things and, you know, they look at Scrum Masters as, oh, well, they're at our beck and call sort of thing. So there was a lot of misconceptions. Now they have said that Scrum Masters are true leaders. True leaders. So it is true leaders who serve. That's what it's been replaced with. And what that has done is, the recent change is made to communicate better the leadership qualities of the Scrum Masters. Because you don't just only help your team to discover their real potential through self-management, that word has come out again, self-management, but you also enable the broader organization to achieve superior results. So there is a lot that the Scrum Master does. They're not just servants. So that's why they've been turned to true leaders. It's been replaced with true leaders, not just servant leader. So even as true leaders, again, just remember that you are still leading from behind. You are not the boss. You are not putting yourself in front and leading from the front, from the forefront. You are still leading from behind. So again, this here, you might see this theoretically in your certification when you're doing your certification. So just bear that in mind, that the servant leader has now been replaced with true leaders who serve. Now we're looking at the responsibilities of a Scrum Master, a facilitator. Now, a Scrum Master as a facilitator. When you say a Scrum Master is a facilitator, people think that you're only saying that they're facilitators because they facilitate the Scrum ceremonies or they facilitate meetings. No, not necessarily so. Now, if I want you to also see the Scrum Master as facilitators who helps and enables the team in achieving their objectives. They need to be neutral. They don't take sides, and they need to promote collaboration within the team. So they are facilitators in that sense. But again, they are facilitators because they do facilitate the Scrum ceremonies and they do facilitate other meetings as at when needed as well. Another responsibility of the Scrum Master is they enforce Scrum and Agile principles. So see yourself as Agile prophets, Scrum prophets. So you are Scrum Masters. You are masters of the process itself. You are masters of Scrum. So you should be able to make sure that your organization and your team follows Agile best practice. Agile best practice, Scrum best practice. They understand what the process is, because what you would find sometimes is you would find some teams or some organizations that says that they're practicing Agile, but you will find a lot of anti-patterns going on. So put yourself in that position as a Scrum prophet, as an Agile prophet, and make sure that best practice is being followed. Another responsibility of the Scrum Master is to protect the team. And when we talk about protecting the team, you protect the team from distractions. So you might have internal interference, distraction, external distractions, and even the team themselves, you protect them from themselves. And I would explain that. Now, in terms of internal distractions, you might have if you have a team of developers now, you're in a Scrum team now. There might be situations whereby one of your developers might get called by another developer on another team, or even by your PO, and get assigned something to work on. Now, remember that they already have work that they are meant to be doing within the sprint, but now they are being distracted, and not a lot of people knows how to say no. They are being distracted. They are being pulled away from the work they're meant to be doing to pick up something else. These are the things that as a Scrum Master, you want to keep your eye on, especially when during daily stand-up, they're giving updates. And there's a particular ticket that the developer has given updates on for the past 2 days and still saying that they haven't completed. You want to start asking questions. And in doing so, you might realize that there would be a developer that will say, oh, actually, Callum reached out to me yesterday and said, can I do this for them on their team, or can I help them out with that on their team? So these things will come out. So you need to make sure that you're protecting them from internal distractions. External distractions could be from it could be from the client, it could be from the customer, it could be from a third-party software vendor. They could get distracted and get pulled in different ways and pulled in to work on different things. You want to make sure that they keep their focus on the work that they've committed to work on and to complete. Again, when we talk about Scrum Masters protecting the team from themselves, now, you would notice that you might observe that some teams they've been working together for years. So now they've gotten so comfortable with the work. They see that, yes, they're achieving, they're meeting their sprint goals and all of that. And they become really, really relaxed in the way that they tackle the work that they're meant to be carrying out. You want to look out for that. You want to look out for your team members and make sure that they're not over-committing work into the sprint that they cannot complete. They're not under-committing work into the sprint that when they complete, they will still have so much time on their hands that they're really not doing anything and they're getting paid. So there are lots of different ways that you want to make sure that you're protecting your team and keeping an eye on them. I'm not saying manage them, but just make sure that you're on top of things. Remove impediments. Now, when we say removing impediments or blockers, as some people would call it, I would usually say that we support, as Scrum Masters, we support our team members to remove impediments. Now, what I mean by that is this. As a Scrum Master, a team member comes to me and says that, oh, I'm blocked on a certain thing, or I have a blocker, or I have an impediment. Now, it depends. If that impediment is something that I know that person would not know the right person to reach out to, or maybe it's an impediment that an external person needs to help us to resolve, then I can then reach out to that external person and support to remove that. There are some blockers or impediments that are kind of like, can be resolved internally. Something like that. You come to me and you say, oh, I'm blocked on this particular thing. And I know that somebody internally can actually help to resolve. Now, what I would do is I would direct this person to whoever it is that I know can actually help to resolve that impediment and say, okay, can you reach out to this person and see if this person is able to help? I'm sure this person should be able to help, but I will follow up with you later on to see how you go. Now, what I'm doing in essence is I'm not just rushing off to remove impediments. I'm not just rushing up and down to remove impediments. I'm signposting this person. I'm directing this person to say, reach out to this person. This person should be able to help you. It might be someone that this person hasn't spoken to before. But in doing that again, I've now created like a communication channel between them as well. So the next time this person has the same blocker, they know who to reach out to. Now, in the event that this person reaches out to that person and doesn't get a response, remember I said I will follow up as a Scrum Master. So I'm sending you off to this person to try and speak to this person to help resolve this impediment. But again, I will be following up with the progress of that. So I will reach out to you again before the close of play that day and find out from you, how far have you gone with this person? Any response, any progress? Now, if you come back to me and you say, oh yes, this person has responded and they are able to help, then that's fine, blocker removed. If you come back to me and you say that, well, you have reached out to this person, no response yet, then I can step in and say, okay, that's fine, I'll follow up. Then I can follow up with an email. So I usually say as a Scrum Master, support your team to remove impediments. Whatever impediment or blockers that they have, that they're not able to remove, probably because it's an external one, or it's something that you have to reach out to someone externally, or you have to reach out to a vendor to help to unblock, then you can then go ahead and do that. But if it's an internal thing, there are some blockers that another team member can actually help with. So that is me saying support them to remove impediments. Another responsibility, and this is another key one for a Scrum Master, is a Scrum Master as a coach. So again, you are an Agile prophet. You are a Scrum prophet, like I would usually call Scrum Masters. Your responsibility as well is to coach not just your team members. You would find yourself in situations where you have to coach the organization itself on Agile. What is Agile? Agile best practice, Scrum itself. So as a coach, now, there are times when you would need to also coach your product owner as well. So please don't see your product owner as the big boss that you cannot speak to, because not all product owners are familiar with what Agile itself is. You might be working with a product owner that actually is coming from a waterfall background and has been a project manager. When they get on your team, they would end up being a difficult product owner because they're coming from a waterfall environment. So you need to look out for your product owner and make sure that your product owner understands the best practice for Agile and Scrum. And if there's any gap that you notice, then it will be up to you to make sure that you fill in that gap by carrying out a coaching session. And the same thing with your team members as well. Okay, I have more responsibilities of Scrum Masters here, improving productivity. Now, what do I mean by that? As a Scrum Master, you're ensuring that your team are free to ask relevant and essential questions. You want to make sure that your team members are free to speak when they need to speak out. You want to make sure that whilst going through the requirements, they understand the requirements. Even during your sprint planning, you're looking through the tickets, you have your story there, you have your acceptance criteria there. You want to create an environment where you want to make sure that they understand what the requirement is. You want to make sure that they have all the tools required to carry out their work. You want to make sure that there are no impediments, and if any has been raised, you're supporting them to remove it. You want to make sure that they have a healthy environment to work in to improve productivity. So that's another responsibility of a Scrum Master. Keeping all parties informed, visibility. So transparency, openness, remember your Scrum values. Transparency, you have openness, you want to make sure that whatever is going on with the team, whatever is going on within the project you're developing, make sure that there is clear visibility. Make sure that everyone who needs to know anything in particular knows what they need to know. Make sure that there's communication. effective communication. If there's any risks that has been raised, make sure that who needs to be informed is informed about the risk. If any change requirement is coming from the product owner or coming in from the business itself, don't just accept it and say, oh yes, the team can work on it. You want to make sure that your team members, your developers are informed of everything that is coming in, every changes that is coming in. Keep them on board, make sure they are well informed. Just make sure everything is visible and clear to everybody. The next one will be conflict resolution, and that's another key responsibility of a Scrum Master. As a Scrum Master, this is one skill that you want to make sure that you have. There will be conflicts within the team. Now, you want to make sure that you have that skill to be able to step in and resolve these conflicts. When there's a conflict, you don't want to rush off and escalate that conflict. You want to try and resolve that conflict first, and make sure that whilst you're resolving the conflict, you're not being partial. Make sure that whilst you're resolving the conflict, you're being neutral. You're not leaning too much on one side. Make sure you're hearing from both parties and make sure that you're being fair. Do not pass judgments. Just make sure you're being fair and resolve the conflict and make sure that everyone, because otherwise what you would have is you would not have a healthy team. And what you will find out is when you let the conflict linger on for too long, then you would have cliques starting to form. And that is not a healthy environment where you want to form your team, where you want your team members to grow. So conflict resolution, there will be conflicts. You want to make sure that you're able to manage those conflicts and resolve those conflicts. Of course, if these are conflicts that you're not able to resolve, you can then escalate. But again, make sure that when you're escalating, you get asked the question, okay, so what have you done as a Scrum Master? What steps have you taken to resolve this? So make sure that you go ahead and try and resolve the conflict. This is a key skill that a Scrum Master should have. Another responsibility of a Scrum Master is onboarding the team. And I know we spoke about this, I think, was it 2 or 3 days ago? I can't remember. So we spoke about this recently, that as a Scrum Master, you will be expected to be the one to onboard your team members. So if it's a new team that is being formed, of course, you carry out the onboarding process just like we discussed the other day. If it's not a new team, you have your team already formed, but then you have a new team member joining your team. A new team member, so Tolu has just joined your team today. You would need to carry out onboarding. You will need to onboard me on your team. Make sure that I have all the right access. Make sure that I've been introduced to the team members. Make sure that the skills that I'm bringing onto the team is well understood by everybody knows the skills so that, we know how we want to work together as a team. Make sure that I have everything that I need to settle into work. So just follow all the processes that we spoke about the other time. And then finally, I have enable close cooperation. So as a Scrum Master, you want to make sure that you get every team member on the same page. Everyone needs to be singing from the same hymn book. Don't be afraid to communicate with your team members, especially now that we have a lot of teams working remotely. So it's easier when you go to the office and you see each other, you're able to speak to your team member, you can read their body language and all of that. But these days you have a lot of remote teams where you don't even have your cameras on and I'm speaking to you, you're not able to read my body language. So you want to make sure that you keep close cooperation within your team. You want to make sure that, again, another way is you can take advantage of the different channels. I know that we have Teams channel on this platform. Even at your place of work, you can create a team channel for your team members where you can meet, you can decide to have like a socials on a Fridays within your team where you play games, where you rotate it, who plays the game today, who does that, who plays the game next week Friday. Just make sure that that close cooperation is there within your team members. Everyone is working together as one and everyone is singing from the same hymn book. Now, you might think that this is going to be difficult. Yeah, nobody says it's going to be easy, but this is where you need to start bringing your skills in as a Scrum Master, your soft skills as well. And that is why you are not a manager, you are a Scrum Master. What a Scrum Master is not. Now, I mentioned this earlier, you are not a hero. As a team, when you win together. When you lose together. When you fail together as a team. It's a team, it's a teamwork. There is no blaming game. There is no, oh, we delivered what we were meant to deliver. Oh, I'm the hero. No, you are not the hero. You are not an hero as a Scrum Master. You are not a coffee clerk. So if you're working from the office, of course, if you're having like maybe sprint planning or you have a meeting with your team members, as a Scrum Master working from the office, you would need to make sure that the meeting room has been booked for whatever meeting you're having with your team members. You want to make sure your meeting room has been booked. Now, as a Scrum Master, one thing I usually do if I work from the office is when I get the meeting room booked, I want to make sure that I have tea, I have coffee, biscuits, and all of that in there, just to make my team members comfortable. But that does not mean that I am a coffee clerk. That does not mean that Deji is going to come to me and say, oh, Tolu, can you please go get me a cup of coffee? No. So you are not a coffee clerk. You are not an errand person. But again, like you're working from the office, you've booked your meeting room, you want to make sure that during that meeting, your team members are comfortable. So that is something that I do personally as a Scrum Master. I make sure that I have the room set and ready for the meeting. It doesn't mean I'm a coffee clerk. So you are not a coffee clerk. What else are you not? I've said this over and over again. You are not a project manager. So please, let's always remember that. And again, you are not the sole decision maker. So when there's a decision to take, please carry your team members along. Make sure you get everyone's input on that decision. Don't run off. So your product owner, again, I'll keep using that as an example. Your product owner comes to you as a Scrum Master and says, we have a change in requirement. I want this story to go into sprint. And you've already started your sprint. Now you understand that the work you have committed into sprint is work that your developers can complete within that sprint, based on their capacity, based on the velocity, the average velocity. And don't worry when I keep saying capacity and velocity, there will be a session for that. So based on the team's capacity and the average velocity, you've already committed work into the sprint. Now your product owner comes with a requirement and insists that that requirement should go into the sprint. Now, as a Scrum Master, you're not just going to rush up and say, oh yeah, that's fine, Deji, let's have it. We can put it in the sprint, into sprint. And then you go to your team and then you say to them, oh, all right, guys, we have a new requirement and we're taking it into sprint. It is not just a decision that you should make as a Scrum Master. You want to make sure that you communicate with your team members, communicate with the developers. Remember that the developers are the ones that are actually getting their hands dirty and doing the work itself. So you want to communicate with them, carry them along before you make such decisions. And again, of course, you're not a secretary. So I think that's self-explanatory. You are not a secretary either. Okay. All right, so Scrum artifacts. So we have, I think about, if you go on, you would find about 7 Scrum artifacts or thereabout, but there are 3 main Scrum artifacts. So even in your certification, you might get asked questions. You might see questions around Scrum artifacts. The 3 main Scrum artifacts that you would usually come across would be your product backlog, your sprint backlog, and the product increment. Now, what's your product backlog? So in layman's terms, see your product backlog as a box where you pile envelopes in. Let me use envelopes. See at the box where you just keep piling things in the box. It's like a garage where you just keep things, you know, the composed inventory of things that needs to be done. So you know that I need to do this, I need to do that, and you put them in that box. I need to do this, you write it on that envelope, you put it in the box. I need to do this, you write it on an envelope, you add it into that box. See your product backlog as that box. And in that box, as you're putting these things in there, again, you want to be mindful that you want to prioritize. So you remember I said you want to do this, you put it in the box. You want to do that, you put it in the box. Now you're putting all of these to-do lists in that same box. But at the same time, you know you want to work on these things. So you don't just want to pick a pile or pick an envelope from the box and run away with it and say, yes, we're working with this. Pick another one and just run away and say, we're working with this. No, you want to make sure that as you're keeping them in that box, you're prioritizing them. So the them that I'm talking about now would be your requirements, your user stories, because remember that the requirements that the BA has gathered is what they would now turn into stories. Those stories are the things that goes into your product backlog. So your product backlog would have a list of things to do. But the list of things to do also get prioritized in that product backlog. And the priorities will be based on value. What value do we want to deliver this sprint? What value are we delivering next sprint? So you prioritize based on value. You prioritize based on complexity, based on dependencies, based on risk. So the ones that are of highest priority that has been prioritized in the backlog are the ones that you want to start looking at to complete first with, or to take into your next sprint and start working on. So they are like emerging requirements. Now, this product backlog is usually managed by the product owner. Usually managed by the product owner. The next one that we have is the sprint backlog. Now, the sprint backlog usually would it comprises of stories that you've committed into the sprint. Now, look at your product backlog as a backlog where you keep requirements that needs to be done, things that needs to be worked on. Now, remember your priorities. Now you've prioritized this list in your product backlog, and you've taken the top 5 priorities as the ones you want to work on next sprint. You want to take them into the sprint. The moment you commit them into sprint, they come out of your product backlog, they go into your sprint backlog. That's what your sprint backlog is. But before you take them into your sprint backlog, there's a process already. You do that during your sprint planning. So you make sure that whatever you're taking into your sprint backlog has been estimated. How much effort will it take us to complete this work? There are a lot of different things that you would need to consider before taking the stories into the sprint. But once you take a story out of your product backlog and say that we're committing to work on this story, it goes into your sprint backlog. And the sprint backlog, that is where the developers, because remember, once it's in the sprint backlog, it's been committed into sprint. You have committed to work on it for that sprint, to deliver it that sprint. So the work that has been committed into the sprint, in the sprint backlog, these are the ones that the developers will now start creating their task. So we've taken a ticket into the sprint backlog, and that ticket says registration, for example. Now, if as a developer, I pick up that registration ticket from the sprint backlog, I want to work on that ticket, I would then start to create the task. What do I need to do for me to complete this ticket, this registration ticket? So let me use another example. So I want to leave my house and I want to go to Tesco around the corner, and I want to drive down to Tesco. How do I get to Tesco? Now, I have taken that story that says I want to go to Tesco. Look at that as a story. Tolu is going to Tesco. Now, we've said that this is our priority because Tolu needs to buy some, maybe medication or whatever from Tesco. It's our priority. Now, we take that ticket and we take it into the sprint, and we commit it into sprint. We put it in the sprint backlog. As a developer, I'm looking at that ticket. I've picked it to work on, and I'm looking at that ticket and I'm saying to myself, what are the different tasks that I need to complete for Tolu to get to Tesco? So I will create those tasks in the sprint backlog on the ticket in the sprint backlog. And then it could be different tasks. It could be that, yes, I'm going to Tesco. I need to get my car keys. I need to make sure that I have my car keys. I need to make sure that I'm able to open the car door, get in the car door. So you want to make sure that the car door the keys itself is working properly, so that when I press it, it opens. I want to make sure that I'm able to open the car door. I want to make sure that I'm able to get in the car. I'm able to start the car. I'm able to move. The car is able to move and get me to Tesco. So these different tasks that I need to complete, I would create as a developer in the sprint backlog as well. Against that ticket, that Tolu is going to Tesco ticket, I'll create my task and then estimate those tasks. Now, the third one is the product increment. Now, going into a sprint, the goal of each of your sprints is to provide increments of potentially releasable functionality. So you've committed tickets into sprint to work on. At the end of that sprint, you want to make sure that you have achieved the goal for that sprint. You want to make sure that you've been able to provide an increment that can be released to the users, a working increment, that if at the end of the sprint, the product owner decides to say that, okay, we're releasing this to the users, the users can actually use it. It's a working software. So that's your product increment. Okay. I think I will take questions at the end. I was thinking I would take questions in between, but I will take questions at the end, sorry. Okay, so let's look at the product owner. So that's the Scrum Masters, and we've gone through the roles of a Scrum Master. We've gone through who a Scrum Master is, who a Scrum Master is not, what a Scrum Master isn't, rather. Now, the product owner, looking at the product owner is the voice of the business, the voice of the customer, the voice of the client, if you want to call it that. They are the link between the business and the team. They are the representative. So what they would usually do is they have direct line of communication with the business, with the customer. They work very closely. The product owner is someone that would understand or should understand the vision, the product vision. What are we building? Why are we building it? What value is this going to give? They need to understand. That's why they call the product owner. They own that product. They will be in a position where you can say they own the product. If you wake them up in their sleep, they should be able to tell you everything about that product that they're developing. And they work very closely with the business. They get the requirements from the business, the vision from the business of what needs to be developed. They understand the objectives. Why are we doing this? What are we doing? So they work all closely with the final users as well. So aside from the business itself, the customers themselves, the product owner works very closely with them. And again, they maintain the product backlog. Remember, I said earlier on that the product owner owns the product backlog. And we will look at some of the responsibilities of the product owner. Okay, so the product owner prioritizes the needs. They consider the needs and the objectives of the stakeholders. They juggle the scope, the budget, and the time to prioritize projects. So like I said earlier on, they work very closely with the business. They work very closely with the clients or the customers. They look at their needs. They look at the objectives. They make sure that everyone is aligned. Everyone understands what needs to be done. They need to also understand what are we doing? How do we prioritize the need? Because again, the users of the business would have different needs. And you can imagine if it's a big project, the different stakeholders you would have on that project. Everybody comes with their own needs. The product owner should be in a situation where they consider all of these needs. They consider what the objective exactly is, why we're doing this, why we're building this, because that would again help them to prioritize those different needs that the customers or the business is throwing at them. Defining the vision. Again, they communicate closely with stakeholders to understand the business objectives. This is a key responsibility of a product owner. They create the product roadmap. Now, even as a business analyst, you might find yourself in a situation at work where, as a BA, you will be creating the product roadmap. In fact, these days, I've seen Scrum Masters being tasked with the responsibilities of creating a product roadmap. And what's your product roadmap? Your product roadmap is what a project manager would call the project plan. It's like the timeline. This is what we're building. How long will it take? And then you put all your features on that timeline. You have your milestones on your roadmap as well to say, between this time and this time, we want to be able to have achieved this. We want to be able to have developed this. We want to be able to have released this. So they create the roadmap. Now, they also ensure that the product is kept in line with the business goal. So again, they are there to make sure that this is the vision. This is what we want to do. This is what we've been asked to do. We want to make sure that everything that we are building and we are working on is still in line with the business goal and we haven't deviated in any way or form. They manage the product backlog. So we mentioned the product backlog earlier on. And I did say that the product backlog is managed by the product owner. The product owner will create the list of the product backlog items. And I will come to the business analysts, the BAs in a minute. They create a list of the product backlog items. They prioritize the work in the backlog as well. Now, if you're in a team where you have a BA and you have a product owner, the BA and the product owner will work very closely together to manage the work. Even if the BA is the one that puts the stories in the backlog, the product owner still owns the backlog, because the product owner needs to make sure that whatever has been put in the backlog still aligns with the business goal, still aligns with what we're trying to deliver. So you will find in some situations that even the developers can put tickets in the backlog. Yeah, they can put tickets in the backlog, especially when you have a technical ticket, a technical story that needs to be written. You can get your developer to write it. But then again, it is still being managed by the product owner, because whatever goes in the product backlog, the product owner needs to ensure that it is still kept in line with the business goal. Again, they anticipate the client needs. They anticipate and understand the client needs to manage the development process. So this is what the client wants. This is what they need. This is what they want us to, they need us to do for them. They need us to develop for them. They anticipate the needs of the clients. So you would find out that when the product owner or even a BA is speaking with the client to understand what their needs are, there are some things that the client might not even say, but you're thinking ahead of them and you're putting out suggestions with them. That is, you're anticipating what they might, because sometimes they might say, this is what we need. But by the time a product owner or a BA starts to speak to them about that need, they might then realize, okay, actually, okay, so maybe not. Maybe that's not exactly what we need. So they communicate very closely to understand the needs of the client. The product owner as a person, it's usually one person as a product owner. You wouldn't usually have like 4 or 5 product owners on a product. I personally haven't seen that. They understand, they have deep knowledge of the market. They carry out things like market analysis. They have deep knowledge of the market. They are the product owners. And again, they create the customer journey map. And this is another thing that BAs does as well. So we will see how they come together, the BAs and the product owners. So another responsibility of a product owner is they act as primary liaison as well. They gain buy-in from stakeholders. Now, when I say they gain buy-in from stakeholders, so one thing is that when there's lack of buy-in from senior management, it is one of the reasons why projects can fail. So helping to onboard them is critical. Helping to onboard the stakeholders is critical. So the PO ensures, so we call them the PO, if I say the PO, understand that I mean the product owner. The PO ensures they are having good quality and honest conversations, and they are actively engaging with the senior leaders, the senior stakeholders, making sure that they are getting these stakeholders involved in the decision-making process and getting them on board with the mission and vision. Because again, of course, we know this is what we want to build. But when you have different stakeholders with different, you have your BAs, I know you've done your introductory session, and you must have gone through the influence and the impact analysis of stakeholders. So when you have different stakeholders on one product, and they have different levels of interest and impact on that product, you as a product owner wants to make sure that you are getting everybody on board to be on the same page. So they act as primary liaison as well. They evaluate the progress of the product. So they're accountable for each stage of the development process and the final process itself. They inspect and evaluate the product progress through each iteration. So during a sprint, your product owner would usually make sure that what we're building, we're still in line with the product goal, with the business goal. Once you've completed your sprint, at the end of the sprint, when you say something is done, the product owner would need to make sure that it is actually done and it meets the done criteria to say, this is what the requirement says. This is what we have hacked. This is what the developers has developed. It checks all the boxes. It meets the definition of done. They will be going through all of that. So because they're accountable for it. Again, they oversee the development stages. They contribute to the planning and execution and the reviews of each sprint. So during your sprint planning, you would usually find that your product owner would be there to make sure that all the priorities that they have put down to say, these are the priorities for next sprint, those are the priorities that you're taking in. If anything has changed in terms of priority, they're there to communicate the changes to you to say, oh, actually, I did say that registration was a priority for this sprint, but it is no longer a priority. So they communicate that to you. So they will usually be a part of that process. They will usually be a part of the review process of every sprint. Now, if your product owner isn't in a meeting, like a sprint planning meeting, your BA would be in that meeting, would be expected to be in that meeting, because the BA, again, can stand in as a de facto product owner. Okay. Now, I'm going to the business analyst role in Agile. Now, I did mention again earlier that the BA role is not a role that is formally defined in the Scrum framework, but it is a key role. It is a key role in every Agile project. The BAs can serve as a bridge between the developers and the product owners. They translate the needs of the business into user stories. So they get the requirements. So if you're in a team where you have a product owner, you have a business analyst, they work hand to hand. They work hand in hand. They work hand in hand. They work together. So the PO understands the vision. Of course, everyone else on that project would have understood what the product vision or the business vision is. So the PO would communicate these requirements high level to the business analyst. The business analyst will analyze the requirements, create their user stories, populate the backlog. They will prioritize the stories in terms of they can use the must code, they can use the must have, could have, should have in prioritizing these requirements. They create their stories and they populate the backlog with the stories. Again, they work very closely with stakeholders as well. So in a situation where you have the BA and the product owner in the same team, it's just a matter of understanding between these two roles. This is what the BA is doing. This is what the product owner is doing. So they work hand in hand together. A BA analyzes product owner's priorities and works to decompose them into small pieces. So when the BA gets the priorities from the product owner, so we have the requirements, we've received the requirements. Now, these are the priorities. The BA gets this from the product owner. The BA will decompose them into small pieces. These small pieces are the ones that we call the user stories. They go off and they write the stories based off the requirements that has been received. Now, again, the Agile business analyst partners closely to the product owner. So you will see that there's a lot of link between the BAs and the product owners. So where the product owner makes the decisions and the BA is there to make this as easy as easy as possible for the product owner by analyzing and facilitating dialogue and getting the right information to the product owner. So they work hand in hand. The BAs, where you have the two of them working together, you would have situations where the BA is very close to the product in terms of making sure that the stories, the requirements that have been put into stories, that have been committed into sprints, is actually what is being developed, follows that process. The product owner is there liaising and communicating with the stakeholders, with the business, understanding, okay, what needs to go, because the priorities that they get, they bring down to the BAs, they bring down to the team as well. Now, so what we have here is the product owner, the business analyst, and how they work together. So from this Venn diagram, you would see that on the product owner side, you would see market strategy as the responsibility, enterprise analysis, product vision, the product roadmap, the customer focused, the manage the big picture of the market expectations and the product, the manage a product backlog, and the manage the release planning process as well. On the BA side, you will see more of the requirement strategy. You will see more of the requirement side of things. Needs analysis, they analyze the needs. They analyze the requirements that has been received. They analyze these requirements, they put them into user stories, they populate the backlog with them. They work with the non-functional requirements, the functional requirements. They create the user stories. They would create the process mapping, the user journey mapping. They create wireframes. So when you have a BA and a product owner within the same team, it's usually the BAs, from what I've seen, it's usually the BAs that would usually create like the process mapping, the wireframes, and things like that. Now, there is a common one up there where you would see at the top, the PO and the BA, where they work together, product and solution strategy, stakeholder management. So even as a business analyst, even though the product owner works very closely with the business, the product owner works very closely with the client or the customers, the users, whatever we want to call them, the business analyst also does the same thing. They work very closely with stakeholders. They work very closely with the users as well. Iteration planning, sprint planning, they are there to plan together with the team what needs to go in. Like I said, the BA can also act as a de facto PO. So in a situation where you don't have, the situation where you don't have your product owner in a sprint planning meeting, your business analyst should be able to stand in and step into that role because they are expected to work hand in hand together. Backlog reprioritization, benefit analysis, workshop facilitation. So even as a BA, you will be you will be expected to have that skill, the facilitation skill, workshop facilitation skills, because you will be facilitating workshops with your stakeholders, with your users. So that's just a Venn diagram to show you, the BA versus the PO and the things that, the roles that brings them together, the responsibilities that also brings them together. Now, what I have here is also a table, again, for the BA and the product owner. So you have the parameter on the left-hand side there. And when you look at the business analyst, the parameters against the BAs and against the product owner, so you would see that the product owners, they lean more towards mostly the business side of things, the customer side of things. So let's take strategizing as an example. When you look at the business analyst, they provide strategies that are relevant to the product requirements. The product owner provides business-related strategies for developing the product. The BA focuses more on the technical aspects of the product. The product owner focuses on customer-related aspects of the product. So where you see them working together, you would usually see shared responsibility with them, but the product owner is closer to the business. The product owner will be closer to the business. When you look at the end goal, the parameter that says end goal, you would see that the business analyst, their goal is to ensure that a technically correct product gets developed. So what is the requirement? What have we developed? What are we developing throughout that process? Now, the product owner, their goal is to make sure that the product sells well and it has high business value. So when you look at those parameters on your left-hand side there, and you look at the business analyst and the product owner, even though you would see similarities in there, because they practically do the same thing, but the product owner probably like on a higher level than the business analyst, but they are quite similar in role. That's why, as a business analyst, you can actually step into a product owner's role. If you know what you're doing, you can actually step into a product owner's role. Developers. Okay, so developers, they used to be called the development team, but now they're called the developers. They're no longer called the development team. Now, the developers, like I mentioned earlier as well, they are the guys that actually they are the ones that do the work. They're the ones that get their hands dirty. They are the ones that carries out the development, the coding, the testing. So these are the guys that actually does the work itself. And again, within the developers, you can have different types of developers, like I mentioned, I think on my third or my fourth slide, where you can have like a full stack developer, a front end. It depends on what the project is. So you can have like a solution architect, a data engineer, a data architect, They are all developers. They are the guys that are actually doing the work. They are the guys that are actually getting their hands dirty and making sure that we build this thing, we deliver this thing. Now, the Agile team consists of cross-functional roles, and the whole idea is that the roles become blurred and everyone cooperates to become one efficient team. So in a team, you want to make sure that your developers, usually your developers are the ones that have the knowledge of what needs to, as a Scrum Master, that's why we say Scrum Masters, you don't necessarily have to be technical, because the developers, they have the knowledge of, the solution architect has the knowledge, the solution architect is experienced, he knows what he needs to do. So they are actually the true knowledge pool for that team. And another key part of the developers is they need to be self-organized. Again, we have our self-organization and self-managed here that we spoke about when we went through the Scrum Master slide. They need to be self-organized. That's one of our goals, one of our aims as a Scrum Master, to make sure that our team becomes self-managed, self-organized. They can work together without being told, what to do. They know what to do. We've told them what we need to do. Let them go away and let them do it. They commit to delivery. So once we commit work into the sprint, once we've committed work into the sprint as a team, the developers are committed to delivering that piece of work, or that piece of functionality rather. And they should usually have a good mix of skills. Again, remember Scrum Masters when we spoke about onboarding your team members and making sure that you have the right skill set on your team to actually deliver what you're developing or what you're building. Again, the other thing with developers is as Scrum Masters, again, Scrum Masters, you will see that you keep coming in within the different roles as well. You want to make sure that your team members, the developers, are not working in silos. You want to make sure that they're working together as one team. So don't let a developer, you don't want a developer that will just pick up their task, run away and just do their own thing in one corner there. You want to make sure that they carry everyone along. Okay, so responsibilities of the developer. So I've got 6 responsibilities that I've put on this slide for the developers. And the first one says that delivering increments and ensuring that everything works as it should be, both before and after release, including programming, testing, coding, debugging of the product. Now, what this means is they are developers. They know what needs to be done. They are the knowledge pool. They understand what work needs to be done to get this particular product developed or whatever. So once you commit work into sprint, the responsibility is to make sure that they deliver that increment. The responsibility is to make sure that what has been developed is working. It has been developed. It has been tested. Is it working or is there a bug? Does it need to go back to there's a bug? We need to get it back to the developer to fix that bug. The developer fixes the bug, sends it back to the QAs. The QAs test it again. Yes, it's passed. We're done. We can then move that into UAT. So that's one of the responsibilities, to actually do the work. So what number 1 is telling us is their responsibility is to actually get the work done. Again, estimating work to be done. So we're in sprint planning and we're committing work into the sprint. It is not the responsibility of the Scrum Master to estimate work for the developers. They should be estimating their work themselves. They should be the ones saying that this story, the developers and the QAs will come together, they will estimate that story together to say, this will take us this amount of effort to complete. Instilling quality by adhering to a definition of done. So again, we're back to our definition of done. So we want to make sure that as developers, as QAs, as data engineers, whatever our roles are as developers within a team, we want to make sure that whatever we are developing and we're putting out there to say we have developed, we have tested, it's done, actually meets our definition of done. So that when the product owner looks at what you've said you have developed, they're able to tick the boxes on the definition of done box and say, this has actually met all the definition of done that we have. And we can actually say, this is done. We are happy with this. This has been completed. Adapting their plan each day towards the sprint goal. So for every day, remember, we have our daily stand-ups as well. So every day they want to make sure that they are focused on that sprint goal. They want to make sure that, again, Scrum Masters, of course, these are things that you will pick up during daily stand-up as well. You want to make sure that they are focused on the sprint goal. So the developers has to make sure that every day their plan is that whatever they plan to work on every day is something that actually would take them closer, a step closer to actually achieving the sprint goal for that sprint. Developers would need to attend daily Scrum meetings and report on each of the tasks that they've been working on during the daily Scrum meetings. So that is their responsibility. You really shouldn't be chasing them up, to be honest, Scrum Masters. You really shouldn't be chasing up your developers to say, it's time for Scrum, it's time for daily stand-up, it's time for daily stand-up, guys, let's join the daily stand-up. You shouldn't really be. It's their responsibility. You've put it in the calendar. Everybody knows that we have daily stand-up 9:30 in the morning. They should be joining that call. And again, the sixth one there is creating a plan for the sprint. Now, that was one thing that we touched on earlier as well, to say that once we've committed tickets from the product backlog into the sprint backlog, the developers should be creating a plan for those tickets in the sprint backlog that we've committed to work on. They should be creating a plan for it. They should be creating their task on how they plan to achieve all of those tickets that has been committed into sprint. So the Scrum Master is not going to go in the sprint backlog and create tasks for them. The business analyst is not going to go in the sprint backlog and create tasks for them. The business analyst has done his or her own job by populating the product backlog itself. The product backlog is owned by the product owner. The sprint backlog is owned by the developers. That is where they break down the work that they need to do to complete everything that has been committed into sprint. So they own that sprint backlog. That's where they do their work. That's where they decompose the stories into tasks. And key points. So what I've put on the slide is just many key points. For the Scrum Masters, the key points we need to note for Scrum Masters responsibilities that you are, the Scrum Masters, your Agile coach, you can be an Agile coach as well, actually, Scrum coach. You are a coach. You are not just a coach that would be expected to coach just your team members, your developers. You will find yourself in situations where you are coaching your product owner as well. So when you look at some job descriptions, you would see descriptions where they're putting Scrum Master that can coach the product owner on backlog management. So even as a Scrum Master, you should understand and know the different techniques to backlog management. As a Scrum Master, you want to make sure that your product backlog is not all over the place. There are some product owners that would populate the product backlog and they just put their stories in there until you're ready to do your backlog refinement and prioritize stories. The Scrum Master should be able to make sure that the product backlog is well managed. And if your product owner doesn't know how to manage a product backlog, you as a Scrum Master, it's also one of your responsibilities to make sure that you coach your product owner on backlog management. Again, as a Scrum Master, you are an enabler. You're not a manager, I keep saying it, you are an enabler. You are a facilitator. You're an impediment remover. You protect the team. You protect the team from themselves, from external distractions, from internal distractions. And I would have loved to give practical examples as well. But I'm looking at the time and I want to leave some time for questions as well. And again, the final bullet point there says that Scrum Masters, you are masters of Agile and Scrum. Now, the product owner, bear with me 1 second, guys. Yeah, sorry about that. The product owner, key points to note for the product owner. They are the voice of the customer. They are the voice of the business. They manage and prioritize the product backlog. They translate business strategies to tasks for development. They learn the market and customers' needs, and they need to understand that. They serve as a liaison between the product, the business, and the developers, the development team. Now, the business analyst, he points the notes for the business analyst. They interact as well with the customers to analyze their needs and find solutions. They create the user stories with relevant acceptance criteria. They discuss with all stakeholders to make sure that there is no gap at any level. This is where your gap analysis comes in as well as business analyst. And then they prepare documents, including design flow, process map, user journey mapping, wireframes. And then for the developers, key points to notes, estimating. It's their responsibility to estimate the work that needs to be completed. The product owner would not estimate the work for you. The Scrum Masters will not estimate your work for you. And the business analysts will not estimate your work for you. Once you know what is being required, once you know what that requirement is, and you're taking it into sprint, you will need to understand, because for you to even estimate a story as developers, you would need to understand what the ask is for that particular story. What is this? What's the ask for this? For you to be able to estimate, it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to also plan your work as developers. Once the work has been committed into sprint, you should be planning your work. You manage your task and you report on progress. So reporting on progress, again, your daily stand-up comes in as well. And software quality. So you're making sure that what you're developing is actually meeting the necessary quality checks as well. So that's your developers and your QAs. So QAs, you also come under that umbrella of developers as well. So I may not have mentioned QAs, but I'm not mentioning QAs because you also fall under that umbrella of the developers as well. And then I think this is actually the last slide. Okay, thank you. Any questions? I can see hands popping up.